Okay. Thank you for having me. Welcome, everybody. My background is as a uh, entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur. Started multiple businesses, and some of them successful, some of them not so successful. And I will say that uh, talking to a crowd of folks who are interested, or either doing startups or interested in startups is speaking to my heart because I've started enough businesses, know the pain and the euphoria of a startup, and the challenges and everything that are involved in that are things that I think unite entrepreneurs. Right? It's that thrill, but it's also sort of living on the edge. And all the things you learn as you go through it. I mean, my biggest learning was not any of my successes, and I've had some good successes. Mine was the worst catastrophic blow up of a startup that should have been a culmination and was just a nightmare. And so whenever I am working with clients, that's the piece I'm thinking about. Like, I do not want that to happen to you, right? So I approach this with a fervor around Main Street businesses. So let me just sort of identify what I mean by that. When I say Main Street business, I don't necessarily mean a storefront on a Main Street retail. I mean a local business involved in a local sustainable economy, who have a community awareness and are part of that business community. Okay. So that's my definition. A lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about today, though, uh, I will use physical Main Street as examples just because it's so easy to use as an example to get across the points. But I want to make very clear, if you're a if you're an accountant, if you're a small business accountant who's operating in a business community, Savage Mill, Annapolis, Salisbury, wherever you are, and you are servicing that community as a small business, you're a Main Street business as far as I'm concerned. I don't care if you have a storefront or not. All right. So I just want to get that clear. Also, when we talk about who are the big boys, let's get our definitions here. When I talk about who are the big boys, I'm talking about monolithic corporate entities. So when I'm using examples, I want to, if you have a small cafe that you run, Ram's Head can look like a very large business, right? Like 7 locations. You know they're doing way more business than you are. But Ram's Head, to me, is a Main Street business. They're involved in the communities they're in. They are not monolithic. They face some of the similar challenges. There's a difference in size, obviously, here in the competitive realm. But to me, the big boys are Verizon, Amazon, Walmart, where you're going up against the corporate entity that's worldwide most of the time, has unlimited resources, has very little knowledge, even if they're in a community or not. They just know they have stores dotted around here, right? So I just kind of sort of want to make that clear as we go. The other thing I will say real quick so everyone understands my biases and where I'm coming from. Um, I'm anti-corporate. I am a huge local business sustainable economy guy. Okay. And when I look at all the economic indicators out there, I feel that to get the society that we want to be part of, it's investing in local business, sustainable local economies, hiring at that level, caring about the community you're in. Those are the things that will get our society where it needs to go, not strictly corporate capitalism. Don't want to get political, but I just want you to know where I'm coming from. Okay. So when we start this out, let me go ahead and get sharing here with the slides.
Thank you for clarifying that, Patrick, because myself, as an entrepreneur over the years, I've been through a couple of startups that I launched and then was able to sell one of them off and so forth. And you're absolutely right. I had to start on Main Street, whatever that meant, virtually or locally, but I was local. It was my local resources. If I didn't get that right, I was going to go nowhere from there. So I appreciate you giving us that background.
Yeah, and I think we all have dreams about where we're going to go, right? I mean, the story of Apple is so classic, right? Two guys go in the garage, they start playing around with stuff, they come out and they've changed the world, right? You go a couple decades out, they change the world, and we all may have those dreams, and we should have those dreams. But the reality is, most startups, if they become a viable lifestyle business that is supporting their owners, supporting the folks who work there and are part of, a community, that is a good outcome. It may not be where you start as you're dreaming, but that for most small business startups is a nice outcome. Now, feel free to go, shoot the moon, go for whatever you're going for. But when I'm talking about this, I am talking about the realities of operating as a going concern in, in a economy where we're not necessarily trying to catch one of these big boys. We're trying to make sure that they're not stomping us out of existence, right? So, all right. So let's talk about this. One of the first things to know is they have advantages. Okay, we all know that is the case, and I think it's important for us to recognize what those advantages are before we start talking about how we can take those on. I also think it's really important as folks. Some of you probably are actual startups. Some of you may already be established, but if you're in a startup, you spend a lot of time worrying about certain things. You worry about how much capital you have. You put together a plan. You want to benchmark to that plan. You're worried about time. You're worried about getting it up. Get enough income coming in. You're worried about a lot of things. I don't know that many small business startups, though, that when they start actually take into account, are they going up against monolithic competition or not? Right? We have an idea. We have a concept. We're in it. We're working in it, not necessarily looking out at the broad landscape. And we may not actually take this into account. And I think it's something to take into account. There are plenty of small businesses who opening up will know they are competing directly with Amazon or with McDonald's or whatever that is. So it's an opportunity to put that into your plans and know what you're going to do to compete there. So the advantages that these guys have, it's sometimes it can be overwhelming to think about this. And Amazon, I think, was one of the most interesting ones because, they started out dominating because of convenience, right? Then they expanded what they were offering, and then pretty soon they were almost a insurmountable distribution network. And so as they've become big in each area, that's led to big in another area, and they become monolithic, as we say. So there's a ton of advantages, and you got to be aware. And so let's look at what some of those are. First one is, I think, the obvious one is marketing reach, right? That the ability to put their brand and themselves in front of people everywhere, right? Just instantly everywhere. And the amount of capital they have to spend on doing that. So, you can go anywhere in this country, walk into a grocery store, and there's going to be some brands that you recognize and everybody recognizes. And if you're a small, farm to market sort of producer and you have to compete there, it's going to be very difficult. Everybody knows who that is. And their placement is so impressive. If you go to any movie today and in that movie somebody opens up a computer, it's an Apple, right? So Apple's made sure that even in our leisure entertainment, they're making sure that they're there. And it always, when I think about that, it always brings, I don't know how many of you ever saw the movie The Truman Show with Jim Carrey or not. It's an interesting movie, but one of my favorite parts in that movie is there's a set of twins in the movie whose only job is whenever they can to try to get Jim Carrey standing in front of a product placement. And then they have to have a conversation with him so that product placement can stay there for a long period of time, right? And that's their goal. And there's some funny gags around it that are pretty interesting, but it is indicative of how this works. And we unwittingly become a huge part of that. You see the Honda guy down here, and you notice he's got all the Honda stuff, but he's wearing a Honda hat and he's wearing a Honda sweatshirt. And how often do you go out and wear the advertising for the brands that you've happened to come across, whether it's a professional sports team, whether it's like Patagonia, whatever it is, maybe you're not unwillingly, like I purposely wear my Patagonia stuff, but some folks they're not even aware they're a walking billboard advertisement for these large scale companies. So that marketing reach is huge. That the marketing dollars are huge. It's really tough to go up against something like that. And then, of course, the one that we all know is the economies of scale, right? The idea that if you're Walmart, if you're Amazon, if you're any of these folks, you can buy goods at prices that we can't even get close to. And those prices are so good that it's actually cheaper for these companies to warehouse stuff and ship it across the country and still undersell you in your inventory. And when you see that kind of economy of scale, you recognize that's if you're going to compete on their game board, that's going to be hard to win that fight, right? And then distribution and reach. I mean, the idea right now that I can sign on to Amazon right now, see something I want, click it, and there's a very good chance it'll show up on my doorstep tomorrow. Okay, that is a distribution and reach advantage that's crazy, right? And we've all heard the rumors that Amazon's got a drone army that they're planning on. When you order it, the drone leaves the warehouse and will show up on your doorstep an hour later. Hasn't come to pass yet, but I wouldn't put it past them, right? So that distribution and reach, huge advantage. And then the convenience piece. Obviously, we just talked about the convenience of I don't have to go outside my house, right? I don't have to do a bunch of searches online to find a distributor or something. If I go directly to Amazon, everything I want is there and it'll be here tomorrow. That's a massive convenience. But we can even look at that convenience in our everyday existence. If we're, it was the holidays recently, if we're traveling across the country to go visit somebody for the holidays, as we're driving down the highway, we're going to get hungry, right? And we're going to say, okay, well, we want to stop to get something to eat. Now, as we're driving along, every third exit is a McDonald's, right? If you're at an exit where there's not a McDonald's, there's a Subway, there's a Starbucks, maybe a Wendy's, maybe a Burger King. If you prefer Burger King over McDonald's, you wait one exit, there it is, right? So that level of convenience, is huge, and it's sort of purposeful because it's not just the convenience. They're right there, right off the exit. I mean, probably not even a half mile off the exit. There's their parking lot. There they are. But here's the other thing about this convenience thing. You could, as somebody like me who's like, I want to support the local businesses, local economy. That's all I'm about. I could get off of that exit, and instead of stopping right there and getting one of those, I could say, I'm going to actually drive the 1.5 miles or 2 miles down the road a little to go into whatever that town's little downtown is. And I can find myself a locally owned cafe, stop, eat there, get back on the road. Maybe it's going to add a half hour to my trip, but I could make that decision. But here's all the things that we all know we do. Number one, we're traveling across country. It's probably, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hour drive. I don't want to add a half hour to it, right? And I'm a little worried. If I drive into town, what happens when I get there and there's no open restaurants, or I do find one and the food's horrible, or is it safe, or any of these unknowns that go in our head. When we pull off here and go to McDonald's, we know exactly what we're getting. Exactly. Doesn't matter what McDonald's it is. You go into a McDonald's, yes, there are some distinctions. I've been in McDonald's that are dirty, right? And I know that, they're not doing a good job making sure everything's clean. They're messy, they're whatever. But the food is always exactly what you know. So there is no worry about what you're going to get, right? And convenience, there's a drive-through. I mean, you're probably not even getting out of the car. So this is, in our current society, convenience is a huge benefit that people take advantage of all the time, right? All right. So as we're saying this, and by the way, there are far more, but I just want to start to give a taste of, what you're up against, right? But let me go back here. See that little picture with the Taco Bell there and the street there. When you get off the highway, that's usually kind of the look that's there, right? And when you go to the strip in whatever town you're in that has all of these um, uh, types of businesses, that's the look, right? But when you go to Main Street, that's the look. So when we start thinking about what our advantages are, we have to start considering that if we attempt to play on the same game board that all of these big boys want to play on, then we have to compete with price, we have to compete with convenience, we have to compete with a lot of areas that we cannot win. So our goal should be to put this competition onto our game board. And that means we got to recognize what advantages do we actually have. And if you compare this picture to that picture I just showed you of the Taco Bell, where would you rather shop, right? Where would you rather be? What's going to leave an impression with you? Driving down a full of signs, industrial slash commerce based street, or something like this, right? All right. The other thing that we need to take into account are a variety of things that we as small business owners almost cling to. Like if you ask, well, what advantage does small business have? Inevitably, somebody says, oh, we're nimble, right? And so it's important to look at what that actually means, okay? Because it is true. If a small business is that sailboat right there, right? We know that sailboat can turn around, can tack itself around, turn around, and go in a different direction relatively quickly, right? Whereas turning that plane around is going to take a little bit longer. And if it's a big monolithic, let's call it an aircraft carrier, it's going to take a long time to turn that aircraft carrier around. So the theory that we can be nimble and quick, it's true. The interesting thing here, though, is that most small businesses don't behave that way. And the reason that is the case is because patterns are what make people work. Human nature is pattern based. And the thing that we all have to be really careful about is consciously we can be nimble, but our entire life is run by patterns, because if we didn't, the amount of decisions, constant decisions we'd have to make in a day are insane. So we become pattern. And when I deal with business owners a lot, I find that they are stuck in their approach. They are stuck in their ways a lot. And so, though this is a conceptual thing that they're nimble, they could be nimble, they're not nimble. And I think one of the best examples of this is our favorite thing that happens to all of us at some point. You hop in the car on a Saturday and you're going to drive to visit a friend or whatever you're doing. And you start driving and you're listening to a song and you're thinking, and the next thing you know, you've driven into your work parking lot, right? And you're like, how did I get here? Well, your pattern took over and delivered you somewhere. And that's traditionally what happens in business. We think conscious thoughts about things that we're going to do and plans we have and all this, but our in the business activity takes our whole day up, and the next day comes and we do it again. The next day comes and you may have thought some great thought of something you were going to do, and a month later you hadn't even taken a single step in doing it. So the way that small business needs to take advantage of the ability to be nimble is they have to build a culture of innovation and adaptation. And they have to build it where it's constantly happening, because everybody hates change. Most people hate change. So if you've built a culture of this, your employees are used to change, your customers are used to change, you're used to change. Okay, change becomes the pattern, and that allows you to actually be nimble. Okay. All right. Let's keep moving here. And then here's some examples of how this nimbleness could work, right? if let's just play retail here. We're a retail store, and we're competing against Walmart, and we're looking at our impulse buy area, right? So what do we have up by the cash register? What do we have, when you walk in the door? What are those impulse buys? Now, for Walmart or Target or any of those, setting up impulse buys is a process. There's research, there's pricing, there's stocking, there's distribution, there's marketing, there's planning, there's testing, there's a whole lot of stuff that has to happen. And once it goes out into the system, it's in stores all over the place in the system. So that's that aircraft carrier thing. It takes a long time to get to doing it, and to adjust from it takes a bit of time also. There's a lot invested. There's a lot of orders that have to go out. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made. You, as a business owner standing in your store at your cash register for impulse buy, right? You go ahead and take whatever it is, sit it up next to the cash register, put a price there, stand back, and over the next week, you watch what happens. Are people buying it? Are they not? If they're not, do you put them on sale? Do you move to another side of the store? Do you throw them underneath the counter and put some other impulse item up there? Your ability to get real-time data, react to it, make moves, test things, try things, it can be almost as instantaneous as you want it to be with real data in real time. That's true nimbleness. Now, I want to be clear that I don't want to be like rose-colored glasses here, Pollyannic. These things do cost money, and you don't have unlimited money. So it's not like you've got 56 different impulse items that you've purchased and stocked under your counter and can throw things up there. So there are limits, but your speed and your ability to test before you put a lot of capital or time in, it's high. And if utilized well, this is an advantage for small business, especially when interacting with their marketplace, their consumers, their prospects. What do people really want? What's working here? Okay. All right. Why you need to stop hesitating. Okay. So here's the thing about being nimble. We can be as entrepreneurial as we want to be, and as nimble in our thought process about what we're willing to try, what we're willing to do, what we're thinking about doing. Where we get stuck a lot is, as a small business, we're worried that one mistake is going to be it, right? That's going to be too dangerous to invest, too dangerous to try that. So we keep doing the same thing. Here's the thing, though. As I said before, the large monolithic companies, before they do anything, there is a bunch of time being spent planning, researching, etc. If you stop the speed to take that same amount of time yourself to plan and research and get it perfect before you do something, okay, you're not taking advantage of the fact that you've got speed on your side, okay? And we tend, as small business owners, to overanalyze, overplan, overperfect, be over fearful of trying things, of going into places, of going ahead and doing this. And here's why it's so important that we move. Because we have the unique ability to adapt quickly too, not just put something out, but as real-time information is coming in, we can adapt it. We can change our message. We can do this, we can do that. When we're competing with the big boys, they can't do that fast. Now, there's a lot of tools out there right now that make you think otherwise, right? You've got all the AI, you've got all the analytics, you've got all this data consumption, big data that big companies can do a lot more with. And that's very powerful, and it does a lot. But even though it may compute instantaneously, the decision-making processes within these companies is still a slowdown. They do not take advantage of that as fast as they could. And you can move a lot quicker if you choose to be in that mindset. And you can learn your lessons and adapt very quickly. Stop hesitating. Stop over planning. You have to launch and try. Okay. Here's my favorite advantage that we have, and that is community. Look, if a community starts to fail, and there's a Nordstrom's in that community, the Nordstrom's tracks its sales and all, and at some point it says, this community doesn't have the demographic to support us at the levels we need. We're out of here, right? Now, if you're a small business on Main Street and that starts to happen in the community, you're going out of business. You're done, right? And we know that a rising tide floats all boats, right? And so in small business local economies, I may be a restaurant and I may have local competition with other restaurants, but guess what? I'm more allied with that competition than I am in competition with them. Because I know that if I'm on, let's say, Main Street in Annapolis, and too many stores are empty, the whole economic piece is going down, right? People aren't coming anymore. It becomes that cycle. I don't want empty storefronts. And I also know that if I'm a destination economy and we as a community are drawing people down here because of whatever it is that attracts folks to that, I'm going to share in that attraction. So all of us doing our part to bring that together is a big deal, right? And I also know this. If I'm an Italian restaurant, I may have my regulars who every single day show up and eat there. But there's a lot of folks who come in and they eat there one time and they're like, hey, we ate Italian last time. Let's look for something else. How about sushi? How about French? So we're going to share a lot of these customers as we do this. And I want to repeat this. I'm using the examples of physical Main Street, but this is actually true across the board. Okay. If you're going to go to a local bank, you've got more than one local bank to try, right? So we have to be careful that we don't look at, we are competitive and we should be. We should use that competition to make our businesses as honed as they possibly can be. But when we're allied as a community, it lends a lot to the overall health. And it's not, business folks don't typically like to hear the word union and unionized. But the truth of the matter is, small businesses behaving as a conglomerate, as a union almost in local economies is one of the most powerful ways for them to make sure things go their way. And the other thing about community that's super important here is it breeds loyalty, right? Your customers, a lot of your customers live around the area. You know them in the community. They know what's going on. You're participating in some of the same exact events, the different decisions that need to be made in the community. All that, as you participate, you become part of that community. People see you as part of the community. They're part of the community. The loyalty to the community transcends a lot of times a corporate entity somewhere that's convenient, but they don't care about us, and they don't. All right. And then the final piece is culture. Remember, if we're destination economies, if part of what we're doing is attracting people to live in, or attracting people to visit, or attracting people to shop, or whatever it is we're doing in this community, we're putting out a very specific culture and vibe. I was struck when I went to Charleston, South Carolina, about how similar in feel it felt to me as Annapolis. There just was a lot that was very similar. But if you go to Charleston, South Carolina, it's very different than Annapolis too, right? It has its own history, it has its own look, it has its own everything. So every one of these destination economies is unique in some way, is presenting some particular culture. It's been said that you could drop somebody, you could drop somebody blindfolded and all anywhere in this country on a highway, on a business highway, take off their mask, and they look around and they would have no way of distinguishing where they were, because all the same stores, same signs, same look, everything are there. But if you did that same experiment in a historic downtown, they would be able to probably begin to figure out where they were, right? So that should never be underemphasized. Okay, so here we see that look and feel of that community, the destination economics piece here. All of these are different places and all of them have different feels, right? All right. Now, this is the most actionable and the most instantaneous impact advantage that small business has over the big boys. And that is relational versus transactional customer service. And this is truthfully huge. We all, the complaints about customer service and how it's no longer that important, and all the horror stories that you get of trying to deal with Verizon or somebody like that when you have a problem, it highlights very quickly the difference between a transactional and a relational customer service. And some of the problems, like if you were to go 5 years, 10 years ago with some of this customer service problems with Verizon and stuff, there weren't some of the tools that exist today that they're using available. So for instance, you go on to their website now and you instantly get a answer bot, a chat bot or whatever to try to answer your questions. And, there's a lot of technology being used by them to try to help you solve your problem. But you have to remember something here. That is still transactional. Their goal is not to interact with you and establish a relationship at all. Their goal is to keep you as quiet and non-noisy as possible to complete the transaction so that they can take your money and not have you cost them money by complaining about anything, right? But as an individual or as somebody who has a unique problem or a unique way in which you need something answered, they don't care. You're actually a cost to them then, right? But that impersonal bureaucracy piece is easily combated in a small business, right? Every single interaction, if it is part of your culture, is part of how you build, how you deal with your clients, every single interaction is the antithesis of that. This is where we will go of what outside of what you expect to solve your problem, to help. And I want to tell a story here to show exactly how powerful this is. I'm going to tell you the bad story and I'm going to tell you the good story. So I'll tell you the bad story first. And the bad story is this. So I was an AT&T customer for many, 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 many years. And I hate AT&T, just so we're very clear. And their service is horrible. And it was just a nightmare. And half the time you couldn't get signal and all that. But I finally broke down because, people are creatures of pattern, which I said. So the idea that I have to go and change my service was overwhelming and I never did. I finally got so sick of it, I said, I'm going to change. So I polled a whole bunch of people. And by the way, I live on the Eastern Shore. So there's, the signal is different and all. So I'm like, okay, what's the best? So they say Verizon. Say, Verizon's the best signal. Say, okay. So I decide I'm going to do Verizon. So I take my whole family. We go to what we think is a Verizon store over here on the Eastern Shore. We go in, we switch our phones, we sign up for plans. They show us all this stuff we're going to get. We're going to get a rebate. We're going to get this. We're going to get that. We're going to get all this stuff. And so this is great. We're signing. We're doing this. We're doing that. Next thing I know, I've switched to Verizon. Now, switch to Verizon. The cost that they told me it was going to cost a month, all of a sudden when I'm getting the bills, it's like $35 more than what they said. And I'm trying to go through the bill to figure out what the heck this is, and I can't. So I'm asking, I'm complaining, I'm doing whatever, I'm getting nowhere. Also, all the various rebates and everything else I was supposed to get, none of them happen. They're not happening. So I'm like, well, this is crazy. So I contact Verizon, and Verizon says, oh, where'd you get that? And I say, oh, here's the store. And they go, oh, well, that's not actually a Verizon store. That's a Verizon authorized dealer. We don't have any control over anything they do. And I'm like, but it has a big Verizon sign. It's got your logo. It says Verizon store. How do I know that? And they go, well, we're really sorry, but those are individually owned um, uh, authorized dealers, and we have no authority over them. I'm like, well, they just set me up. And long story short, I ended up complaining enough that I ended up speaking to a woman who was relatively high up in Verizon, and she said, "Hey, I just want you to know we're actually a really good company. We really are. I mean, I feel a lot of the ways you feel and so on, blah, blah, blah. But there's a lot of stuff that we do sales wise that I don't really agree with. And I just want you to know that the next time you deal with Verizon, go to the Verizon that's located in Harbor Center in Annapolis, because that's a real Verizon store. And so everything that happens there will be honored, and they can solve any problem you have. So now I have to go there every single time I want to do anything, because I'm even scared to call a Verizon thing, because I don't know if this is real Verizon or somebody else, right? So, it's like, okay, what was that? What train did I just get hit by, right? Okay, now let me juxtapose that with this story. So I was doing a presentation on the Great Small Business Plateau, which is one of the things that I speak about. And I was using examples of this relational versus transactional piece. And I had a person come up to me afterwards, and he wanted to tell me this story. And here's his story. He said that a few years back, his sister was having some anniversary of some sort. It was a significant anniversary and meant a lot. He wanted to do something really special for her. Like, he really needed to impress her and show her how much he cared, whatever. And he had this idea that when they were growing up in the house they were growing up with, there was this one piece of furniture that was like an antique piece of furniture that had some meaning for them. And he wanted to find that same piece of furniture, and he wanted to give it to his sister, right? So he starts looking, and he does what we all do. He goes online and he starts searching for furniture and antiques and all this kind of stuff. And he's not finding anything, and he's not getting any answers. So he starts to go sort of antique shopping. He actually goes out to the antique stores, and he's going around. He's doing all this kind of stuff, and he's not getting anywhere. He's getting absolutely nowhere. And then he's driving through his town, and there's this little boutique store that's like a gift store. It's got some antiques, it's got some other stuff, and he's there. So he's like, you know what? I'm just gonna go in and see. It doesn't look like there's that many antiques, but who knows? So he goes in the store, and he's walking through the store, and there's a woman behind the counter, and she says, can I help you? And he says, he goes, it doesn't look like you have what I'm looking for. I was just checking. She goes, well, what are you looking for? So he tells her the story, and she goes, well, I don't carry that type of antique very much or anything like that. And I probably wouldn't get something like that in there, but I deal with a lot of the antique buyers and the antique auctioners and all that sort of stuff all the time. If you want, write down your name and number and a description of this, and I'll see if, any of them have seen anything like that, or if I come across it. So he says, what's the harm? He does that, hands her the slip. By the way, she turns out to be the owner of the store, right? And so he says his goodbyes, and he never expects to hear anything about this again. Drives off. About a week and a half later, he's got to make a decision now. And he's like, I'm not going to find this thing. I need to start looking for a different gift, right? And the phone rings. He picks it up. It's the owner of that store. She goes, remember he came in my store? Blah, blah. He goes, yeah. She goes, hey, I was just talking to a guy who was at an auction. He thinks he saw your piece. He took down the name and number of the people who won the piece in auction. They have a store up in Pennsylvania. Would you like that number? And he's like, yeah, I'd love that number. Thank you so much. Right? She's okay. Here it is. So he goes, okay, but what do you get out of this? And she goes, well, what do you mean? And he goes, well, how do you get paid? Do I owe you money? What will you get a put? She goes, no. I don't get anything from this. I just trying to help you out, all kind of stuff. So he's like, just like this, like when he's telling me the story, he's emotional. He's like so excited. He goes, so I go up there, I go to the people. It is the piece. I buy the piece. I give it to my sister. She's as blown away as you would ever expect. It's the greatest thing ever. And he goes, now, here's what I do. He goes, every time I have a gift to get, I go to that store and I desperately try to find something in that store that will solve my gift thing. Half the time it doesn't, but I want to give her business. And he goes, and I tell this story everywhere. I've told it on social media, every networking thing I go to, I've told it. He goes, I am a walking billboard for that woman's store. Okay. So if you don't believe this, you should. The ability of us to empathetically and affinity wise to connect to our customers, to hear what they're trying to do, to make an impression, to be relational, not transactional, is the ultimate antidote to all the impersonal, bureaucratic, convenient sales that there is. Okay?
Definitely.
All right.
You just got through going through the very reasons that my most successful startup got launched and lasted even till this day. Even though I've sold it, the business keeps going into it and so forth. And that was all for the reasons you
Yeah.
just gave, including this one especially.
And that our ability to listen to an individual customer is something large businesses do not listen to individual customers. They listen to aggregate blocks of customers. We can listen to every individual customer. All right. And then, that meaningful moment piece, I think that story is a good one, but I want to tell one other. My family supports the library systems a ton. My wife worked in the library. My daughter worked in the library. My son worked in the library. A couple of the Maryland library systems were clients of mine. We love the library. But one of the things that struck me the most local library wise, and this isn't necessarily business, but it is community organization, right? It is serving customers, having impact in the community. And one of the things that happened for us was my daughter was an avid reader, and she read like all the books in the library. And the children's librarian at the time paid attention to what she read and stuff. And at one point came up to her and said, hey, I've got this series of books that I really, really believe is something you would want to read, right? And so April's like, okay, let me try it out. So April started reading these books. They are her favorite books. She became obsessed with them. She read them all. And then she also went and bought the CDs to the audiobooks to listen. So for about 5 years of time, and I think she still does this in college, by the way, but for about 5 years of time, she would play one of the books, and it was random. She'd pick a CD. She didn't have to start at the beginning of the book. Didn't matter which book. She would just pick a CD, put it on when she was going to bed, and just let it play the whole time she was going to sleep, right? So I never read I read one of them, but I didn't read them. But I know all those books because I had to listen to them for 5 years, right? But the point of this was this book had an incredible, tremendous impact on her. And it was one of those landmark moments as she was growing up that is told and has influenced what she wants to do and everything else. And it was very much a relational moment of customer service between one person in an organization and one customer. And imagine how that multiplies with the number of people that walk through that library, the number of kids who are reading books there. If she's doing that at that level, the relational impact, the community impact she's having is huge. Okay. All right. Final little one that I want to talk about here that is an advantage is our ability to present an authentic brand. And by authentic, what I mean is this. We all are in business to be in business. Okay. And the purpose of business is to make money, right? You got to be profitable to stay in business. And that's why you're doing a business and you're not going and working for somebody else. You're attempting to create that economy for yourself, right? And one of the things, we may be doing what we do because we have that skill, right? And we may be doing what we do because the opportunity presented itself. But in each one of us as an individual, we have additional purpose. And that purpose comes to play in who we are in our business, right? What our focus is in the community, the things we care about, how we treat people, how we interact, how we do things, what we think. All of that is incredibly meaningful. And most small businesses are not just profit driven, they're also mission driven. People are in it because they want to help people, or they, whatever it is, there's a greater purpose. And small business has that ability to say authentically, not sell somebody. Verizon tells us that they're customer friendly. They're not. Okay. Doesn't matter. They're advertising that they are. If you're customer friendly and you put out that vibe, we are customer friendly, and that's your focus, and you truly are, then people who care about customer friendly are drawn to your business, right? And when they come in, because that is your purpose and you do that naturally, they leave happy. They leave as a raving fan because you delivered what you said. It wasn't, one of those bait and switch things where you claim to be this, but you're really this. You just need to get them in the door. This is you projecting that true, authentic, purposeful brand, why you do what you do. That creates raving fans. That creates people who want to stay doing business with you. That is a complicated thing to make happen. So I'm only brushing over that. But it is something that small business has way more ability to make real than large business does. So the whole culture and brand, super important. All right. So the next thing to know is this. It is really nice to be able to lay out how small business has some advantages over big business in theory. But the reality of this is we've got to also mitigate their advantages. Some of their advantages are really overpowering for certain industries, right? And so how do we do that? And the first thing I will tell you is this. I alluded to this at the beginning of this talk, and that was the idea that if we play on their game board, we're going to lose. So we have to make the game board that we're playing on. We make it aware. We need to make our customers aware of the game board, right? Because we need them to buy into our game board. And on our game board, we can't beat the big boys in their advantage areas, but we can at least lessen the impact of those areas. So let's look at a few of those. All right. So marketing reach. You are not in any way, shape, or form going to be able to spend in marketing any of the big boys, right? And in fact, most small business budgets in marketing are drop in the bucket. But one of the things that small businesses can do really well is guerrilla marketing, right? The big boys don't even pay attention to that. And guerrilla marketing plays really well into what we've been talking about around community, around relational customer services on, right? This is where you sponsor the baseball team, the local kids baseball team. This is where you help plan the parade. This is where you use that community affiliation piece to market right where you need to market in a meaningful way. Okay. Here's one of the things that you see happen a lot. Okay. I'm involved in a lot of chambers, a lot of chamber boards, all that sort of thing. And if you go to any one of these chambers, and you look at their roster of chamber members, you're going to see any big company that's in that town is going to be on that roster. They're going to have spent their $2,000 or whatever it is to be a corporate member of that chamber. And they do that so they can come in, they can make sure that they're attached, they know what's going on. And they can also, in their minds, say that they're part of the business community. But as you go about working in that chamber, they're nowhere to be seen. They don't go to any of the events. They're not part of making things happen. They're rarely involved. They may want their name up there so that they are perceived to be part of the community, but they're not involved. And by the way, people know that. People know who it is that's getting the stuff done. The people, when they come and meet other people, that's who they begin to interact with. So if we switch this from sponsorship to involvement, we win. All right. Um, Economies of scale. This one's really difficult to mitigate, but there are a few things that can help. And one of those is, as I talked about before, the concept of more small businesses banded together have more purchasing power. And you see this a lot with like regional associations. I work with a bunch of printers who have a little regional association so that they can buy paper and other things at better pricing than they would buy individually. Also, I know of a couple of tchotchke sellers who do the same thing so that they can get their stuff at a lower price. It's still not the same pricing that Walmart's going to get or Target's going to get, but it definitely mitigates some of the damage, right? And then, convenience, distribution. I think being really inventive in this area is what gets you somewhere. I'll give one example, right? I'm gonna order something from Amazon. I order it from Amazon. It arrives the next day. It comes in its box. I got it. The convenience, the price, free delivery. I don't think I can compete with that. But one of the things I can do is make it worth your while to go ahead and get it from me because of something else. Change the game board, right? The package arrives, you open it up. I've done something really unique inside the packaging of that package, or there's some little gift in there. There's something that when I open it, I smile. I'm so happy that you did that for me. And I talk about it, right? And maybe it took 2 extra days to get it to me. I don't know that can be fixed, but the moment that I start experiencing that, I make a conscious decision. Do I need the convenience right now, or do I want that feeling that I get when I order from those people, or that service that I get, or whatever? So making that in some way unique, the experience of opening that up. And I think there are other things. I want to give one example of the delivery of this, the marketing and the nimbleness and the relational sort of all mixed in. Because
Yes, definitely.
we just had a master class in adaptability and innovation brought to us by COVID, right? So as small businesses, as business, when COVID hit, there no warning really to us as to what to expect and what was going to happen. And timelines were never accurate. What was allowed was never sure. Our ability to be able to adapt and figure this out as we went was like at its height. That was something that needed to happen. And I had a whole lot of clients going into COVID, and I watched, and I couldn't help but watch what my different clients did. One of my clients immediately shut down, laid all her people off, shut the doors, said, I'm going to hunker down. I'm going to wait this out, and I'm going to hope that I can come back afterwards. Okay. One of my clients recognized what was happening, went and got one of the state of Maryland $100,000 grants to change over his production stuff to be able to produce PPEs and stuff for the medical community, and immediately shifted, super innovative, shifted what he was doing, got an award for it, all that sort of stuff, but just recognized what was happening and made the most of it. But the story that I like to tell is a local restaurant that, because the restaurants, as we all know, were hit incredibly hard. And this local restaurant looked at what was happening and wanted the first to immediately say, you know what, we're going to do curbside pickup. we're going to let people call in and place whatever orders, and we'll put it in a safe place for them to pick up, and started shifting to curbside, carry out, that sort of stuff. But then they went a couple of steps further. They put out on their website that if you wanted to have a dinner party, because people were bored out of their minds, you didn't just have to buy the prepared food. You could buy from them all the ingredients, the menu. Like, it was beautiful. It was a menu, all the ingredients, the instructions to make everything. So it wasn't just the food. It was that you would pick this thing up, you'd go home, and then it was everybody had to prepare it. You set the table with the menu. I mean, it was like a little gathering, a little fun thing to do, right? Then they added a food truck to this. So then they said, okay, we're going to take a food truck and we're going to say we're going to be in this neighborhood on this day of the week. If you place your carry out orders, we will bring it to the neighborhood. You can come out of your house, walk up to the thing like an ice cream truck. We'll hand you your food. You go back, right? And we're also going to bring mixed drinks in this truck. So you can also say, we're going to have a margarita party, or we're going to have this or whatever. So people would come, get all of that. Well, guess what that did for them? They pull into the neighborhood, and all the neighbors who didn't know about this and didn't hear about it, they're like looking out their door, and there's this truck out there, and all their neighbors are coming out and walking off with mixed drinks and big things of food. And so of course they're coming out and go, what is this? Right. And so this idea that not only did they mark that was relational customer service, they were extremely nimble. They were creating magic moments. They were marketing, guerrilla marketing, right? People are going to remember that this happened, and that carried past COVID, right? I mean, that reputation, everything they did, launched them out of COVID back to what they were doing before. That kind of approach is how we all should be thinking, because that's what we can do that a Verizon can't.
Well,
that
Patrick,
is my
that's a
talk.
good point. I'll tell you that was excellent stuff, and it makes me think. Okay, here we are at 2025. It's not too late to do something different right now to launch our year with like that, like you just described. I'm not sure I'm going to do that, but I know that the business that I created that did the best, a tech business that finally went across the United States and Canada and became one of the dominant players in its industry, was built because it started as a small business software, enterprise-wide software, for the first handful of customers. And each customer that got across the country was a small business in their local town, in their local neighborhood. But because of the product, they were now able to extend their reach throughout the nation by connecting with other small businesses using my software as a networking and business, a way of combining forces. So everything you're describing is just absolutely correct for a startup. I mean, how can you do customer discovery without the points you're making? That's relational is customer discovery. I'm blown away. The point is, I'm blown away. If anybody else has a question or a comment, please take over from me, because I'll start ranting. This guy really brought some good points home to me.